For most of human history, our biggest ethical questions were all about us. How should we treat each other? But what if our moral responsibility is bigger than that? What if we actually owe something to the rivers, the forests, to the planet itself? Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of environmental ethics. It seems like such a simple question, right? But the answer is incredibly deep and complex. And what's really wild is that for centuries, we didn't even think to ask it. But now? Well, now it's a question we just can't afford to ignore. I mean, really think about it. All of our great ethical systems, our philosophies about justice and rights, they were all built around one single relationship, people to people. It was all about our duties to each other, fairness within our own community. It was an inside game, a conversation just for us. But then our power to change the world around us grew a lot. And we started running into these huge problems that our old ethical rulebooks just had no answers for. It was like our moral maps were designed for a small town, and now we're trying to navigate the entire globe. We needed a serious upgrade. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll get a handle on this new field of ethics. Then, we'll diagnose the old-school human-centered worldview that's been running the show. Next, we'll explore a really powerful idea called the land ethic, grab ourselves a toolkit for thinking clearly, and finally, see how this all applies in the real world. So let's jump in. What does it actually mean to expand our moral circle? We're not just talking about being nice to animals. This goes way deeper. Well, it's a whole field called environmental ethics, and it's revolutionary because it asks us to stretch our moral concern beyond our own species to, well, everything else, the entire biosphere. It's the philosophy that asks these huge questions like, does a river have rights? Or what do we actually owe to a species that's on the verge of extinction? Now, to really get why this field is such a big deal, you have to understand the powerful, deep-rooted idea that it's pushing back against. And that idea is called anthropocentrism. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is simple. Humans are at the center of the universe, morally speaking. In this view, nature is basically just a giant warehouse of resources. It's only valuable for what we can get out of it. For centuries, this has pretty much been the default operating system for modern society. Okay, this slide right here, this is the absolute heart of the matter. The whole debate boils down to this. The traditional human-centered view says nature has instrumental value. A forest is valuable for its timber. But the nature-centered or ecocentric view makes a radical claim. The forest has intrinsic value. It has value just because it exists, because it is a forest. It has a right to be here, totally separate from its usefulness to us. And that is a huge shift in thinking. So how do you make a shift that big? Well, this brings us to a forester and ecologist named Aldo Leopold. He witnessed some major ecological disasters, like the Dust Bowl, and it pushed him to come up with a powerful new way to think, a new moral compass. Leopold's big idea was for us to stop seeing nature as just a collection of stuff, as property to be owned and managed. Instead, he said, we need to see it as a biotic community, a huge, complex, interconnected web of life, where we humans are just one part. And this one idea changes everything. Because if nature is a community that you belong to, then your role is no longer to be its conqueror, standing outside and above it all. Nope, you become a plain member and citizen. And being a citizen comes with responsibilities, right? You have to show respect, you have to participate, you have to care. And this is his famous maxim, the very core of his land ethic. It's that new moral compass. All of a sudden, the measure of right and wrong isn't just what's good for humans. It's what's good for the entire community. Does an action help preserve the health, the stability, the beauty of the whole system? If yes, it's right. If no, it's wrong. It's so simple, but it is a profoundly world-changing idea. So Leopold gives us this powerful guiding principle, but how do we actually use it in messy, real-world debates? For that, we need a clear toolkit. Let's break down how philosophers approach these kinds of problems. Moral philosophers break down arguments into 3 different levels. And once you learn to spot them, it really helps clarify what people are actually debating. You've got descriptive, normative, and critical ethics. Let's use our forest example to see how this works. A descriptive claim is just a fact. A poll shows 55% of locals oppose logging. It's just describing what is. A normative claim is a moral judgment. We should not log the forest. See that word should? That's the key. And then there's the critical level, which goes even deeper. That's when you ask, hold on, what do we even mean when we say a forest has a right to exist?
Understanding these levels helps you figure out if you're arguing about facts, values, or the very meaning of your words.
Okay, so we've got the big idea and we've got the toolkit. Now let's put it to work. Let's see how this framework helps us think about some of the most urgent issues we face today.
We're going to look at how this ethic plays out in three critical areas: on the global stage, with sustainable development, and the surprising connection to war and peace, and right down to our own daily choices with consumerism. Take the whole concept of sustainable development. This is basically a real-world exercise in environmental ethics. It's a huge balancing act. We have a duty to help people in poverty today. We have a duty to the future generations who will inherit this planet. And we have a duty to the natural world itself. It's all about finding a way for everyone and everything to thrive. Now, here's a connection that often gets missed. An environmental ethic is fundamentally an ethic of pacifism. War isn't just a human tragedy, it's an ecological catastrophe. It destroys landscapes, poisons water, and consumes unbelievable amounts of resources. From this point of view, the billions we spend on weapons are resources literally stolen from our ability to solve things like the climate crisis. And finally, this brings it all right back home, to our own lives. It forces us to take a hard look at the consumer culture that drives so much damage. It asks us to really think about our personal choices and to live in a way that's a little more harmonious with that big biotic community we're a part of. So, here's the bottom line. Our scientific and technological power has just exploded. But our wisdom, it hasn't quite kept up. We now have the power to fundamentally change the planet, and with that power comes an unavoidable moral responsibility. We can't claim innocence anymore. We know what we're doing, and we have to choose how to act. And it all comes back to Leopold's profound shift in perspective. The entire project of environmental ethics, all of it, can be summed up in this one goal: to stop acting like conquerors and to start acting like citizens. And that leaves us with a final question for you to ponder. In your own life, your own community, your own local environment, what part of it is calling for you to stop being a conqueror and to start being its plain member and citizen?